I'd like to bring the meeting of December 22nd to order. In doing so, I'd ask if anybody besides LCAT is recording this meeting.
Not recording it?
No. Not recording it? Okay, if it's hearing none, then we'll move on to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of December 8th.
So moved. You got a second?
Second?
I was in there.
Okay, I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then moving forward, I think we're going to hear from Bill Cornelius about the rail dog waste bags.
Close.
You can call me Cazellas.
Cazellas. All right.
First, let me say that the dog park's going well, and no major incidents there, and I hope it's been okay from your perspective. No complaints, I hope. And Jim Russell couldn't make it tonight, so he asked me to be here, and he is donating a third waste bag dispenser unit for the rail trail.
Awesome. Beautiful.
He didn't say anything to me about, because I know that he's gotten, some donation plaques for the first two that are there, so he may be giving you a call. I'm not sure about how he wants to handle that, but he asked me to come to present this to you today. And because you mounted it, the other two on the post there, we didn't, give supply the post with it, the metal post. So
I'm sure we can figure it out.
you can handle that.
It's,
Thank you very much.
thanks,
All right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
See you again.
Thank you.
Following that up on that, Jim Russell had called me a number of weeks ago and asked me how things were going, were the stations being used, and I checked in with the guys, and they are changing the bags frequently, having to change the bags frequently, which is a good sign that they are being used by the users of the rail trail.
That's great.
Yes.
So with that done, we're going to move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay. Tonight I'm going to focus the majority of my report on the department's draft operating budget. We have a deadline, as the board knows, of January 13th of submitting the budget to appropriations. I expect to be in a position to present the final draft of the budget to the board in the first week of January, once we set a meeting date for January. I'm going to spend most of tonight talking about the approach to the budget, and probably less about the specific numbers, and the main reason being this is the first year that we're entering into the creation of Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. It gives us an opportunity to step back and take a look at making some adjustments. We have to make some adjustments in the creation of the Water and Sewer Fund. It also gives us a chance to make some adjustments in terms of where and how we've carried costs between the various divisions in the past. And so that's primarily what I want to present to you, and with the goal of getting the board input and ultimately agreement on the approach. The next step is then to provide that information back to the town accountant. The town accountant will then use that to develop specific costs associated with the way that we decide to staff the various divisions, particularly the indirect costs, because those can't be established until we're in agreement in terms of what employees and what categories of employees would exist within each one of the divisions. I did speak with town council this morning, because as the board knows, town council is reviewing the draft policy agreement that was put together between the Board of Public Works and Board of Selectmen. And my takeaway from the conversation with the town council, who called me just looking for some background information, is that it's going to be his recommendation that this is primarily a Board of Public Works controlled item. We're primarily talking about Board of Public Works related items, and yes, there's some tie-in to the Board of Selectmen, but really it isn't a significant Board of Selectmen item in his mind. And I expect he'll be presenting that to the board the next time he gets together with them. So what I'd like you to do is call your attention to the first page in the handout. What I tried to do was present some type of a graphic that would explain the changes of the staff allocations between the divisions. When we first started taking a look at creating the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund last March and April, Mr. Burek and myself took a look at the staffing that historically had been budgeted, at least over the past several years, in the Water Division and the Sewer Division, and took a look at what staff were actually utilized within those divisions and what those staff were utilized for. And we concluded, I think appropriately at that point, that those divisions were probably a little bit overstaffed. They had kind of drifted away from what the, maybe appropriate level of staffing. Not that we had too many people in the department, but we had too many people allocated within specific divisions of the department that were performing functions in other divisions. So this originally started with taking a look at the staffing within the water and sewer divisions and really appropriately identifying the staffing that belong in those divisions. It then led to taking a look at the other divisions that have staff in them, highway division and building divisions, recognizing that we are not looking at shifting staff out of the department because we need every staff person that we have, but properly allocating them within the divisions that exist within the department. So any change that we make in one division affects the other division, so we have to really look at everything holistically. I will talk you through a couple of the items. One of the items that's easiest to explain is that what will happen with the enterprise fund is all of the employee-related costs will be carried by the water and sewer enterprise funds for the employees that exist within their divisions. So I indicated a large box at the top right-hand corner that indicate those costs that are currently being carried by the general fund: workman's compensation, health insurance, Medicare, retirement. Those will now all be carried by the water and sewer enterprise funds as opposed to the general fund for the staff that are allocated to those divisions. Maybe starting with one of the simpler ones to explain, taking a look at the building divisions, which is the second to the left. Historically, we have placed, let's see, historically we have, I guess maybe I'll back up even a bit further. Within each division, there are people that are budgeted fully within the division, and then there are some people that are budgeted across multiple divisions, or allocated or apportioned across divisions. Within the building division, we historically had apportioned 25% of the superintendent's salary to that division, 25% to the highway division, 25% to the sewer division, 25% to the water division. We're not proposing any changes to that. That seems very appropriate that the superintendent supports in a relatively equal manner each one of those divisions. We historically have carried 25% of the operations manager salary within the building division, even though the building manager essentially operates as the highest level manager within that division without requiring any direct support from the operations manager. So the thought there was it would make sense to take that 25% share out of building, take the operations manager out of the building division, but at the same time recognize that the administrative services manager supports that division, and supports that division probably on a very similar equal percentage, about 25% of her time. So those are the changes that are being proposed within the building division, basically taking 25% of the administrative services manager's time, putting that into the building division, taking 25% of the operations manager and take that out of the division, leaving that a net of 8.5 full-time equivalents within that division. Probably the next thing I'll do is I'll talk about the line that goes across the top of the four boxes. As I had alluded to, a change to the administrative services manager. Currently, the administrative manager was carried 100% by the highway division. Similar to myself, the administrative services manager supports each one of those divisions in a fairly equal manner. So the suggestion right now is we take 25% of the administrative services manager's salary and budget that across all 4 of the divisions. We have a new position of town engineer that was formerly the position of senior project manager, same seat, different job responsibilities, different title, different person, but a person that had a different title. That person used to reside entirely within the highway division. That person provides services to some of the other divisions. Typically, again, the building division is a pretty self-supporting division. The operations manager pretty well handles that division and his people without needing a lot of engineering support, without needing a lot of operations support. So the proposal there is to take 50% of the town engineer and keep that in the highway, take 25% of that, put that into sewer, and take 25% of that and put that in water. And examples of the support type of activities that the town engineer would be providing to the water division would be designing water plants, designing our next water main replacements or water main extensions, or as you'll hear about tonight, being responsible for designing and overseeing the construction of our next round of sewer infiltration and inflow improvements within the town. So I believe that the town engineer position is one that supports multiple divisions, but primarily the highway division to the greatest percentage, and then to a lesser percentage water and sewer. So what that means is that we take 1 1/4 full-time equivalents out of what had historically been carried by the highway division. We put 25% of them into the building division, which is the administrative services manager. We put 50% of a full-time equivalent, or 25 and 25, into the sewer, and 50% of a full-time equivalent, 25 and 25, into the water. Working across the bottom and starting in the water and sewer divisions, when Mr. Bjork and myself looked at the staffing in those divisions, we had historically carried 6 staff people in the water division and 6 staff people in the sewer division. Taking a look at the people that we actually utilize in those divisions today, the more appropriate number there is 4 technical staff people. We then have 1 individual who does essentially 100% of her time is billing related to water and sewer. So that individual we propose to be split essentially 50-50 between water and sewer. So it gets you to 4.5 full-time equivalents. And then when you add the um, 50% coming in and subtract 1 coming out, you end up at 5.5 from what is currently there. We're actually currently, when I say 6 staff, we're 6 staff plus I have to do this math in my head. Currently in the fiscal 15 budget, there is 6 full-time staff, but then there's a portion staff on top of that. So there is 25% of my salary, there's 25% of the administrative service managers, there's 25% of the operations manager in there. So there's essentially 6.5 staff people there now. We're proposing reducing that to 5.5 staff people through sort of the reallocation of people and putting them in the more appropriate places. When you take a look at the numbers, this all drives the numbers. Where do you put the people? What boxes do you put them in? And what percentage of people do you put in each one of those boxes? We also tried to keep the...
So the 5.5 is after you put them in and take them out, that's what...
That's the net. That's the net.
All right.
So in total, we get to 42 staff within the division, if you add up each one of those
And so
boxes.
5.5 in sewer,
Right,
and then 22.5 in highway.
that's correct.
That's the end number after you go ins and outs.
That's the end number, correct. And it's somewhat important to look at that too, because when we take a look at some internal costs that are employee-related costs, such as the cost of uniforms and clothing, for instance, that really should be allocated based on the body count between the different divisions. As you'll see, that really hasn't been the way it's happened. So I've tried to adjust some of those to make them more accurate in terms of how they track the number of people and the costs associated with those people. So it's kind of a complicated explanation of what I've done there. Basically, we've reduced a bit
42?
the number of staff in the water and sewer divisions. We've netted out the staff in the building division, but we've shifted the staff, and we've increased the staff in the highway division.
So total FTE is 42?
42, correct. And if you'd like, when we get to it, we can look at the individual spreadsheets that have the numbers that follow these staff, but this is essentially the methodology that was gone through.
Okay.
From an expense standpoint, I didn't put together a graphic there because it's a little bit easier, I hope, to explain. There's the second table, or the second sheet in your handout. Each one of these line items represent a proposed change in the DPW's expense budget in fiscal 16. Most of these changes, by far, most of these changes are reallocations of costs between divisions. And I'll start, for instance, at the vehicle repair division. What I did, again, when Mr. Burek and I took a look at the vehicles, and what we've done right now is we've allocated vehicles to the building division, the water division, the sewer division, the highway division, with the idea that the responsibility to maintain and to operate those vehicles fall to those divisions. Where those divisions are funded by the general fund, it's a little bit less critical which division they end up with, but where they're funded by the water and sewer division, it's very important that the water carries the cost of operating the water vehicle and the sewer carries the cost of operating and replacing, if necessary, you know, the water vehicle. Based on taking a look at the DPW fleet, 22% of the vehicles in the fleet are assigned to the water or sewer division. There are some specialty vehicles, the sewer rotter truck, the water truck, things like that, that are used for nothing, aren't even used for snow plowing, for instance, because they're specialty equipment. So as I took a look at items that historically have been carried by highway, which has been funded by the general fund, I took a look at shifting 22% of the vehicle repair cost out of the highway division and then splitting that 12% to sewer, because sewer has 12% of the vehicles, and 10% to water, because water has 10% of the vehicles. So the 13,000, and the math won't be perfect here because I did increase a couple of these line items by the 2%, not every line item, but a couple of these line items by the 2% number that appropriations indicate they'd likely be willing to support. So vehicle repair, for instance, we continue to see those costs increasing all the time, so I felt that was one I felt it was important.
As the fleet gets older.
Correct, absolutely. To ask for the 2% escalation there. So you can't take 13,817 and divide it into pieces and get the same numbers I see below, because one number's, they've both been changed by 2%, but it's the math, it works out. I've checked it a couple of times. Working down the list, there have been some items that as I take a look at, and again, I'm stepping back, taking a look at everything and saying, does it make sense? There have been some items that probably historically maybe began in the water and sewer divisions, like wireless communication. That was probably most critical when we had pagers relative to pumping station operation, and we had people responding to alarm conditions and things like that. So we likely began to incur those costs within the water and sewer division, but they're not, by no means, they're limited to the water and sewer division anymore. In fact, they're part of doing the business, you know, across the board these days. So some of these costs, like a uniform cost, is really better apportioned, I believe, based on the quantity of people, particularly that have those devices, than putting it specifically in the water division or sewer division. So basically, I felt that the water and sewer divisions slightly overcarried that line item and shifted, in this case, $2,000 up from the sewer division to the highway division. But I did also note that in total we've decreased that line item because we have shifted to a national governmental account with our cell carrier, so that we have seen some significant decreases in our total wireless billings. So we've decreased the total billing and we've shifted some of the costs as well.
That's the 4,000 and that's the wireless communication sewer is down 4,000.
Correct.
That's what you're talking about there.
Yeah, we decreased, a net decrease was $2,000 off that total combined budget for
Got it.
wireless. 2,000 of that we moved up, 2,000 of it we said we don't need. Purchase services, and I have to go back and reacquaint myself with exactly everything that's covered within that item, but it's an item that we typically struggle meeting budget, and it is one that I'm looking to increase by 2%. I know that when we present to appropriations, we're going to need more backup for that, and at this point, as I said, I really wanted to get the process and the approach nailed, and then we can work on the fine points of what the numbers actually look like. Vehicle fuel, that was a fairly straightforward one. Again, that one does work, because as I take a look and we all see what's happening with fueling costs right now, I don't expect, over the next 18 months that we're going to see our fuel costs increase from what they had been budgeted for in fiscal 15. So there I'm proposing to flatline that budget. So you will see that the math does work out, that you can take the 25,890 and separate that into a 12% piece and a 10% piece, and they will equal each other, being shifted down to the water and the sewer. Supplies is an item that, again, I recognize that we need additional support for it, but I'm recommending to increase by 2%. Uniforms is an item that seems to have been historically underfunded by the Highway Division. A lot of that cost was carried by the Water and Sewer Divisions, more than it really should have, I believe, and that's an item that I think is really directly related to the number of people, and is absolutely related to the number of people more than anything else. So I took a look at that total budget. I'm not recommending an increase in the budget, but I am allocating that budget based on the number of full-time equivalents in each one of the divisions. So the same process really flows down through here. That largely these are numbers being moved back and forth between divisions, and a couple of line items where we are looking for up to a 2% increase. The only two items, I'll jump to the last two lines here. I did have some discussions with one member of the Appropriations Committee, recognizing it's not the entire committee, and the committee probably doesn't have an opinion on this as of yet on the snow removal budget, but I asked the question, was there a desire to try to at least close the gap between what we historically appropriate and what our costs are? And the thought there was that perhaps we close the gap a bit. In a very good year, the amount of money that we budget might get us through the year, but we know just about every year we're going to be over the appropriated amount. And we're able to, through state statute, we're able to essentially incur the cost that's necessary to get the job done, and then go back and look for transfers to make the budget whole after the fact. But what I've done here is I've taken the expense line item, which is essentially our salt purchase, and I've increased that by 40%, which is the escalation in salt cost that we saw this year. That is likely still not enough, except maybe during a very ideal year. But at least it takes that baseline up just a little bit. The other item that I'm recommending, and this is one we'll probably have some additional discussions because it will exceed the 2% threshold. It will have to be a supplemental item as opposed to a standard budget item, as I am looking to increase the waste disposal budget within the waste removal division by about 15%. And I guess two things. One is we've talked about, we know that our costs have continued to escalate at a rate higher than what our current budget can accommodate. We did increase our sticker fees this year by about 12%, and we are taking a look at revenues this year as a way to increase the revenue at the same time. So I believe we're looking to essentially increase what we can bring in to support that enterprise, even though it's not an enterprise fund, in a similar amount as we're looking to increase that expense line item. And we can back that up in terms of higher sticker fees and things like that. Waste costs continue to go up, and we can't continue to provide the service that we've been providing without looking for some way to increase that line item, and doing it right now through increasing the cost to the residents to use the facility. So that's a lot of words talking about concepts. I won't even attempt to go line by line, but I'll just introduce you to the next pages, which are, these are the specific budget sheets that the town accountant has provided to each one of the departments. I've gone and I've added lines to it to make it a little bit easier for you to follow, from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of the table. Every item you see highlighted here in yellow is an item that's either highlighted in the graphic. Actually, let me explain. The top part of this page is the salary table. The bottom part of this page is the expense part of the table. So each one of these salary items that you see highlighted in yellow is an item that is highlighted in the graphic that I presented at the beginning in terms of shifting the allocation of staff around. Under the non-salary expenses, each one of those items that are highlighted in yellow are those items that are tabulated in the table. So I tried to take everything you see here and put it in one location, because so much of what is here is moving from one page to another page to another page. I tried to put everything together where they could be seen at the same time. This will be 1 year where, as the department is familiar, we typically put together an overall DPW budget sheet, which we will do as we finalize our budget. That's really what's going to tell the story of the total increases in budgets this year, because there's so much moving around of expenses and salary costs here that it's very difficult to directly compare the highway division this year to the highway division last year and the water division this year to the water division last year, because of, again, all the movements that we're doing with the enterprise funds. So there's a sheet for each one of, and this is just a munis quirk. Right now, the highway division is referred to as administration. We're going to get that updated. It's Department 421 or Division 421. That's more correctly titled highway. The next page is 422, which is the building division. So maybe before I go too far, if you want to stop at the building division, I'll just explain a little bit how the salary table works. If you see the first highlighted line, the one that has a budget in fiscal 13 of $386,981, those are people that are fully budgeted within a division. Then when you see the second highlighted line, those are the apportioned people. So in many cases you see that one of these lines increase and one of these lines decrease, because we're taking someone like in the highway division, our administrative services manager was historically budgeted 100% within the highway division. She is now carried in our proposed approach 25% in the highway division, so her salary, instead of being carried in that first line at 100%, is carried at 25% in the second line. Again, fairly complicated, but there's really, how many people do? There's four positions that are, five positions that are apportioned. The superintendent, the administrative services manager, the operations manager, the town engineer, and the biller. So those 5 people are the 5 people that make up the apportioned salary line. In different percentages depending which division we happen to be looking at. In some divisions they're exactly the same amount, because we're talking about the same percentages of the same people. In other divisions, they're not. For the board's purpose, I brought one other table that I'll hand out, which is an overall salary matrix of the entire department that makes this a little bit easier to kind of connect all the dots to as well. It's all actually created as a single Excel spreadsheet with multiple charts all linked together, so that all these numbers, I'm fairly confident, ultimately add up. But it's tricky to follow. That's why I put the graphic together. So now moving on, after the building division, is the Utilities Division. And I'll make the note on the Utilities Division that I've highlighted in yellow, which is I fully expect our natural gas costs to go up in fiscal 16. The current contract that we have through Lower Pioneer Valley Education Collaborative, along with many other communities, will expire in the fall of calendar year 15. When it expires, I'm confident the gas prices will go up for all the reasons that we've heard relative to pipeline capacity and short supplies and things like that. At the same time, I'm optimistic that that increase will be offset by the decrease we expect to be realizing by the electrical net metering costs at that point. So what I'm suggesting at this point is we level the utility budget, recognizing the gas budget will likely increase, but the electricity budget will likely decrease. Also recognizing that we've historically underrun that budget. If you take a look at fiscal 15, excuse me, well, our budget in fiscal 15 and fiscal 14 were the same. So in fiscal 14, we had a budget of $1.135 million. We expended $0.92 million. So we were comfortably below budget. We've historically been comfortably below that budget. So we also have a little bit of cushion if my estimation of the savings on electricity through net metering credits offsetting increases in gas prices, we still have some room to move there. Okay, the next sheet, next two sheets, the first one is the Water Enterprise Fund. The only thing that's different about this sheet that I'll call attention to in the Sewer Enterprise Fund is the last four line items under salary are the direct salary, the direct employee benefit costs that we expect will be incurred as I'm able to work with the town accountant to confirm what those costs really were. So as a placeholder, I've carried some numbers from last year when the former town accountant had estimated what some of those costs were. They will likely be, I'm not going to say what they'll be, I'm not even sure. If we're comfortable with how we've allocated staff, the next step again is to calculate what those costs will be for the allocated staff. And then we ultimately need to recognize that those costs are still only estimates. One big staff change, and then benefit costs change, depending on what benefit plans staff elect, for instance, during the open enrollment period. Sometimes the costs might go up, sometimes the costs might go down. So the Sewer Enterprise Fund sheet, the next one is set up the same way. I make the same comments, that there are placeholders in there for those employee-related costs. The next sheet is the waste sheet, Department of Division 433. I highlighted the top line. There's no change in it under the salary line, but I just made the note really to appropriations that, we remain very fortunate to have some very dedicated former DPW employees that work for us at the transfer station. If and when those employees no longer become available in the future, we're going to see that line item go up. So we should hope they stay in good health and we continue to benefit from their assistance, because we are getting a very good deal for what we spend. And then the light item down below is the one I talked about, the waste budget, where I am looking to move that up to 15%. And I do recognize that I ultimately have to complete a supplemental budget form, but I want to show it in one place to start with. It's complicated enough already. I didn't want to have to show in two different sheets. And then the last sheet is the snow and ice budget. I said the only thing that I've changed at this point is essentially is taking the fiscal 15 expense budget, which is primarily salt purchases, and I've increased that by 40% as a step towards closing the gap between what's really spent and what we appropriate, but without the goal of getting all the way fair. So there's a lot to digest. It's not a typical budget year. because there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah, but you get it pretty well explained though.
The employee piece of it is, it took me a while to work through it and add the numbers up and be feeling confident that I had people counted up correctly, but I'm pretty confident I do now.
Jimmy, you're gonna have a problem with the 40% on the snow and ice? Because that's just gonna skew the whole thing, and this is something that we've always been allowed to.
I mean, that was the direct increase of the salt, 40%.
Well, we've had discussions back and forth over the years. As you know, it's one of the few accounts that the state allows you to overspend, and you have to pick it up when it comes out of your state aid for the next fiscal year. So it's basically buy now, pay later. I think last year we used a portion of our reserves to buy it, and so we wouldn't have to pay it out of our state aid for this coming year. But we can talk about it. It's been really underfunded for many years, with the theory being you didn't want to ever be over budgeted for it, because then that, according to the at least two accountants that I've worked with, that caused even other kinds of problems. So we kind of left it underfunded, and we just bit the bullet and, ate that slug out of the next year. But it's probably reasonable to start thinking of at least getting it a little closer, so it's not, because it really is this year's issue, and we always use it for next year. So I think what Eric suggested is at least an approach, and we can see how it fits. And then, if it doesn't work this year, at least we know, and you've discussed it with us, and we know that there's some issues, that we have to deal with. But it seems like at least a reasonable way to start. And as Bob said, the committee hasn't really discussed it. It's just been a couple of communications.
One of the things you might check into is the calculation that they do when there's emergencies. I think they kind of look at how much overspent you are and appropriate it to the town's most overspent. So you may just want to look into that.
I'm not sure what you mean, Jeff.
When you overspend ice and snow, or when there's emergencies with ice and snow and the state declares emergency and then they send money,
Yeah.
I think we send something that says how much overspent of our budget,
Yeah.
and they throw that into the calculation of how much they're going to help you.
Okay, I guess I haven't seen that. I assume probably the 1030 storm might have kicked something like that in or whatever.
Yeah, or every once in a while we get those ice storms and big
Yeah.
storms or whatever, and just checking whether the calculation of how overspent you are.
Okay.
That came to my attention at one point. I don't know how real it
Yeah,
is.
but I think they really want to see what the cost of the storm was before they shell out what you.
No, I know that, but then I do think it's kind of like gateway cities or whatever. Whatever town is in the most trouble, they then kind of ration it out that way. If we put $500,000 in and we don't need the money, I don't think we get it.
Yeah,
That's my point.
Another argument for not over budgeting that category.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So we just look into it. If it matters not, then we should probably come closer. If it matters, like this year so far, we're not spending very much. So could we get all the way through the year and not spend very much?
We haven't got to January
I
yet.
know that.
February, March.
I know that. And I'm not wishing it on you,
Always a
Tom.
good one,
Trust me.
St. Patrick's Day.
Tom, I'm not wishing it on you. Trust me.
So at this point, I expect, each member will have to spend some time digging into the numbers. What I will, if the sort of the overall approach that I've talked about in terms of how we allocate staff makes sense, I'd like to move forward and at least indicate to the town accountant that I'd like her to move forward and start generating the employee benefit costs associated with those people. And that way we can start, getting closer to a real number. She and I are getting together early next week also to start talking about presentation of the remainder of the enterprise fund information, because we're still only really talking about the expense piece of the balance sheet that we have to present. We'll also be having to present all the items such as what the direct principal and interest obligations of the water and sewer enterprise funds will be, what the balances of the reserve accounts are within the funds, what surplus is expected or not expected during every year as we set our rates. All that information has to be incorporated in what gets presented to town meeting.
Well, I feel comfortable with the number of employees. I mean, we've spent a lot of time working on this.
It makes perfect sense to me. I feel comfortable with it. You can, as far as I'm concerned, you move forward with it.
Yep.
Thank you. And certainly, if any members individually have questions, feel free to see me, and I can share the spreadsheet that this is all built in. It's all in a single sheet, as I said, with everything linked together. So,
And refresh me on, only because I do the negotiation,
Yep.
wage increases, where are we latest, greatest with that?
right now, we are following the direction of the Appropriations Committee, which is that we only incorporate wages that are currently obligated by contract. And what that means right now is that there are, within the people that are represented in this budget, there's only 2 positions that are under contract for fiscal 16, and that's my position and the town engineer's position. Every other position is a union position or contract position that's up for renegotiation. So everything else that's presented is today's dollars.
And when will we get an indication of anything different?
Well, my understanding for the budget, that's how you approach it. I think what Eric referred to when we had the budget guideline meeting was we were hoping we might learn a little bit more from the state and then be able to provide some type of guideline.
Do we know that date yet, or no?
No, I think he was figuring.
We're scheduled for January, early February, to start
It's the first week
negotiating.
in February, yeah.
Because we're theoretically supposed to negotiate and present to town meeting, because we'll be into fiscal 16. Our contract's over in June.
Yeah.
So we would be negotiating now. We've pushed it off till January, February, but that's always the big question. I mean, we can talk boots and uniforms and hours they work and lunch pails and everything else, but
Yeah.
And you got a new governor coming in, so he can change anything as far as...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how much more we'll know in
It's
the
gonna be
timeframe
delayed.
that we're talking about.
so I'll sound like a broken record as I go, only because,
We'll at least have met and we can broach that and either, and to the degree that we can or can't.
right, if you can't answer it, you can't answer it, but I'll be in negotiations kind of without,
We don't want
and I think all the other,
Solve that.
I think all the other departments are too.
Yeah.
If I'm not correct, I believe, if I'm not wrong,
They got everything on...
I believe every single contract is
Yeah.
up June 30.
to, it's pretty widespread.
So we probably need at least some guidance to get,
Bless you.
okay?
Only one other item I did want to mention,
Bless you.
which was just to advise the board that our swans that we've historically had at Heritage Park over the years have been permanently relocated to a facility in North Barrington, Illinois. And they're actually a facility that specializes in the care and breeding of swans. As you know, we acquired these swans over 10 years ago. We acquired them for the primary purpose of helping us with geese control at the pond. We learned over the years that that was not effective, that the swans did not serve the purpose that we had acquired them for. We also learned over the years that although many people became very attached to the swans because of the aesthetic aspects of the swans, that they were becoming more and more a liability, that they were becoming more and more aggressive, and were putting the town in a concern regarding liability of what might happen if somebody was injured or harmed by the swans.
But what did happen, though?
What did happen, correct?
They put a woman in the hospital.
Right. In addition, and as the board may know, for years the State Department of Fisheries and Wildlife has really not been very excited with the idea of the town having swans, given that they are technically invasive species, and they're always concerned about swans breeding and the breeding offspring escaping and becoming part of the wild population and interfering with the wild population. So they were very supportive of us no longer having swans. The other thing, and really the last thing that contributed to our decision to relocate the swans, is that we lost the location that we historically had housed the swans at the Lupa Zoo in the wintertime as a result of, again, some problems that the Lupa Zoo had with the aggressive nature of the swans last winter when they were there, that we could no longer take them back to the Lupa Zoo. We spent several weeks looking for alternative sites. We talked to 20 or 30 different sites that initially showed some promise of being willing to take the Swans. Ultimately, though, the facility we found in North Barrington was the only possible solution that we came up with. I do regret that we did end up losing one of the Swans, the male Swan, about 2 days before he was scheduled to be relocated to Illinois. Passed away. We don't know of what cause. He was alive and well in the morning, and by noon or so of that day, he was no longer moving and no longer alive at that point. So we did end up shipping 2 Swans to Illinois and did not ship the 3rd Swan to Illinois. But at this point, we are out of the Swan business and really have no plans to get back into the Swan business.
I think it's a smart move.
Right, when we bought them, they were supposed to be light sex, and so there would not be a breeding problem, and they made a mistake when they paired them up, so.
And one of the problems is that even our permit we had with the state required us to sterilize the male swan. Even the best avian hospital outside of Boston, which is one of the nationally recognized avian hospitals, will not sterilize male swans because most times it results in killing the swan because they have to put them under general anesthesia to do it, and the rate of success is extremely low. So we were being asked by the state to do something to control the potential to affect the wild population that we couldn't do without having negative impact on the swan. So again, we made a decision we had to make.
I think it's a good one.
Thank you.
With that said, we're going to move on to the town engineer's report.
Town engineer's report. Okay, tonight just a few things. The first one, you should have a memo about the rebid of the sewer main and manhole test and seal project. We did rebid that project and had 3 bids. We opened for 3 and got help with more than 3, but ended up with 3, and we're happy with the results. As you can see, there were 3 bids: Inland Water, National Water Main Cleaning Company. The third one was from Green Mountain Pipeline of Royalton, Vermont. They were the low bidder for $76,677. They've done plenty of work in the area. I think they've even done work in the slide.
I think they have, yeah.
Yeah, so we're happy with them, and we would definitely recommend to proceed using them. The work would be scheduled for the spring. I think we have in there July 15th. The only thing, there is a section of manholes that is to the west of North Main Street. In the back there, sometimes it gets a little wet, so we told them if it was too wet to work, we could kick that a little bit into the summer, but I think we'll be able to get it done.
I'll make a motion to award Green Mountain Pipeline from Royalton, Vermont, the contract for the sewer main and manhole test and seal. $76,677.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just I'll give you a couple updates of things I'm working on. The second one I spent a fair amount of time on is the reimbursement for the October 2011 storm for the federal roads. We found we've been working on the reimbursement. We've gone back through the records. Last Thursday, I met with the kind of Mass DOT liaison that administers that. We went over all the numbers. It looks fairly certain we're going to get a decent reimbursement. I would guess $150,000 back to the town coffers on that.
Awesome.
Still working through on that. Third thing, bundled NOI. I actually spoke with Tanya in Wilbraham, DPW there. They've got a bundled NOI. I've got a couple of examples, so I'm putting that together. There's a couple changes since they originally filed the stream crossings and there's some new emergency regulations, so we just got to iron out some of those. Also talking with Robin, but working on that.
Maybe if you don't mind, if you could just explain what the purpose of bundle NOI is,
Yeah, I'm
what
sorry.
our goal is.
Yeah, the bundled NOI, basically, it allows the DPW to do maintenance. So it's roadways, drainage, allows us to do things without having to go before the Conservation Commission every time we want to work within a jurisdictional area. So it allows us the ability to get work done more quickly without having to go to Conservation Commission meetings repeatedly.
No, that's great.
Yeah, which they've been in favor of it. I've been talking to Craig off and on. He's been in favor of it, yeah.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Accomplish that.
Okay. Two other brief things, we're working on basically a roadway list for improvements, just compiling that, getting that pulled together, and at some point in the near future, we'll have that back before you. And then the last thing we're looking at is a review of materials at the transfer station, just to see if there are ways, I know a fair number of people in the industry, if we can find some ways to save some money with metals, see if we can get some money back. You've got the bulky waste material, so reviewing that. And that's the 5 things I got.
So you're going to try to sell some metals or something to
See if we
offset
can,
the double
yeah,
charges?
see if
Yeah.
we can find some better prices. I think right now it's a even cost for us. They take it, but they don't charge us anything. Maybe there's some ways we could see a little more revenue, or a little bit of revenue back for that service.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Think, any other business?
I don't think so.
No? With all that said, you want to schedule our next meeting?
Sure.
Mondays or Tuesdays, what do we do?
I am probably not good on the 5th. I'm good on the 6th.
I'm good on the 6th.
The 6th?
Not good.
No.
It's not good.
Okay.
Nah, I'm gonna skip. That's my wife's birthday.
Oh, you wouldn't want to do that.
I want that one.
7th? Wednesday?
You want to go to 7th?
I can do the 7th.
Wednesday work?
Okay.
Wednesday work? All right. Wednesday, January 7th? Is that the right date? 5 o'clock here?
DPW.
Okay,
Miss it for the world.
Motion to adjourn.
so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.